Welcome to In Her Own Name, where women stop whispering their greatness and tell the power of their own stories, with your host, Lillian Obogo. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are, and welcome to another episode of In Her Own Name. I'm Lillian Obogo. Now, first, let's start with Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2026. This is here hoping that this year is a better year for us and all. And it's a year where people have that space to breathe, unpack, unwind, and find joy. So, to you and yours, Happy New Year. Now, I have my first guest of the year, and I am so excited. She is somebody I have the pleasure of calling a friend. She is an amazing woman who stands in the space of neurodiversity. This girl is not just talking from here is my knowledge, but this is her lived experience. So she has the knowledge, she has the lived experience of what it means to be in the neurodiverse space, what it means to be a woman who is neurodiverse and understands the different layers that brings. And she works now with clients who are neurodiverse. So join me and welcome my incredible guest, Danielle Cudjoe-Michalski. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, you are so welcome. You are so welcome. I'm honored because two things here. Like I said in the beginning, you are a friend and you're somebody that I have watched develop and change and grow. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. I mean, you are a woman who has 20 years in STEM and corporate spaces. You were in project management in roles that were particularly, well, people will say is male dominated. And you navigated that corporate life, you navigated all of that with neurodiversity at the time before your diagnosis. And when you had your diagnosis, you then became the co-founder of the Neurodiversity Network at GSK, which is where you used to work. So you were actually shaping cultures, you were doing all of that. And I've watched you traverse that journey, and I'm really proud of you. So it's my distinct pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
All right, so let's begin because, guys, you know me, I'll just sit here and fangirl for another 45 minutes, and that would be the show. And you'd be like, Lillian, do better. And I'd be like, nope. But let's start. And I have so many questions for you. So we spoke about the hats that you've worn. You've worn so many hats, from project manager, founder, coach, advocate. When somebody asks you, what do you do? How do you describe yourself now?
It's such an interesting question and it's very tricky. I say in the space I sit right now that I'm a founder, coach, and advocate around neurodiversity, regardless of whether it's the workplace or whether it's at home.
Right.
But actually, when I was thinking about this, I think the advocacy space is something that I'm really proud and really protective of, being that catalyst for change, being that aggravator and that person's going to question people and organizations around what are you doing and how are you showing up. And that really means a lot to me. And it was a part of how I got to where I was and navigated how I was individually through my career, but how I support my clients.
Right.
And also, how do I kind of add value to the community? And so it's really weird because most entrepreneurs and founders will be told you have your elevator pitch. And I do have the one that's generalized, but it does depend on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to someone in the corporate space, then I talk about where I lived in their situation. If I'm talking to business owners and founders, and I talk about where I sit now. If I'm talking to people in the advocacy space with me, because some amazing people doing some amazing stuff, I talk about the added value I bring. So I don't have that standard pitch. It depends on the individual. And I tailor it on purpose with intention, because it's about connecting. And for me, as a neurodiverse woman, my representation is really important. And one of the things that I'm very mindful that hits on top of that is being a Black woman. It's being of a certain background in a certain country, having a certain privileges, having a certain challenges, even down to how I wear my hair, how I dress. All these things come as a part of the package. And so I'm very mindful of tailoring that and bringing out the hats when I need to make that shift and make those connections.
I like that. And I like the fact that you've laid also the intersectionality of you being a Black woman, how that affects you, how that shows up, and all of that that helps shape you. And I love the fact that you're like, yeah, I have the standard elevator pitch, but I also have A, B, C, D. And I think sometimes, I think the advice of having that standard elevator pitch, I think what you just demonstrated, it can be also very limited because people are not a standard elevator pitch. And I think even from that, understanding it from a neurodiverse point of view, that can be so limited. But to have you say, no, I have different ways of seeing myself, that in itself is a freedom that people need.
I think the reason why I think it's important to be able to learn to pivot and really understand the layers is because, so for example, I also talk about hidden disability. The word intersectionality kind of gives me a bit of an ick because it's in the corporate world, it's like a tick box. Like we've done that. And I'm like, well, what does it mean? What have you done? Because depending the word intersectionality, we know the origins as Black women, particularly, we know that it has been shifted and molded into different things. So if you take it as it is, particularly in a corporate and workplace environment, it can tick multiple different areas. So if you're ticking that big, massive box, what are you actually demonstrating you've done? So breaking that down around, actually, if we're going to go deeper than just my race and my gender, we're going to go to my being neurodiverse. Some people identify as neurodivergent, ND, and going with that identity for me, then going into my hidden disability, just stay on that plane. Then we're looking at two separate things that can impact me than the way I show up, than just the intersectionality piece. And so one of the things I find really important when I'm talking to people is giving them a little highlight of my journey, because that connection is what draws people to listen and really take time to say, this is someone I want to connect with. And that connection, which we know as whether you're building a business, whether you're doing a high side hustle, whether you're just building a personal brand, or whether you just want to connect to just get to know people, or even promotions, that connection is really key.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of ND people really struggle with that. And I always say, sometimes we need to put certain terminology aside and just really just follow our instincts, and be comfortable with ourselves, which is a different thing.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole different kettle of fish. And we'll get to that at another point. Now, we're talking about the fact that, yes, you do advocacy work for neurodivergence, and you talk about this and you share publicly about your own neurodivergence. When did that self-understanding begin to take shape for you, and what impact did it have on how you showed up in your workplace?
Yeah, I think the impact, so just for everybody who doesn't know, a quick update. When I grew up, I was always a talker. I was never a writer. Obviously, when you're a baby and going to nursery, it doesn't really matter. When you're going to school and things start to progress, obviously we're all tested on our writing capabilities in terms of communication style. And that's when my mum saw there was issues. She actually went to my primary school saying that my daughter has issues, potentially dyslexia, and they said no. Fast forward into university, and knowing that I still had those challenges, and coming from a Caribbean background, you went secondary, you went to school, you went to Saturday school, all sorts of interventions that I have a privilege to be exposed to. Not everybody does. But my mum had also had a conversation with me once she had gone to school around, I couldn't go to university. They told me I wasn't good enough, smart enough to go to university.
Wow.
And they also, and this is at the age of about 7 and 8, and that I was a dyslexic. And she constantly had people saying, no, she's fine. And then when I got to my final year of university, after having spouts of mental health through uni about my capabilities and imposter syndrome, words that didn't exist back then, I finally understood and got exposed to the word and did my own stuff and got diagnosed severely dyslexic. At that time, I was graduating, so I went straight into the workplace. So I didn't have time to digest and know what it meant. And dyslexia was still, we'd just come out of the 1990s, so dyslexia was still known. It wasn't known in the Black community, minorities. It definitely wasn't something that was readily available. The internet had just started, just FYI to those listening. It wasn't like, oh, you could just Google it. No, because Google was very different. We had things like MySpace, and no one was talking about other things other than music and
Tom. And Tom, don't forget Tom.
Yeah.
Everybody who was friends was Tom.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was really hard to get information. It was very hard to find communities and spaces. Forget about even spaces that look like you, just generally information. And then I went into the workplace and was told not to disclose, and I didn't. And so I came as a microbiologist. I spent 10 years in microbiology, just doing what a lot of my clients or other people that I now coach do, which is just bobbing along and just trying to survive, and really not really understanding and not putting the time and effort into understanding my dyslexia and working from a deficit space and not a strength space until the latter part of those 10 years, when a senior leader came back from leaving the organization back into a less senior role. I had the opportunity to interact with her, and that gave me an introduction to not only coaching and mentoring, but also strength-based supports. So that was the first pivot. And then I shifted into project management. And when I shifted into project management, some of the new things and the structure that I had in the lab then was different, and I had to adapt, and that was really scary. And there still was more talk about disability. And I also started to develop hidden disabilities that I'm very vocal about, around autoimmune stuff that came up. So there's more advocacy in that space, advocacy in the Black community, and that stuff within GSK. And then I kind of got to my 15 years or so, and I realized that I just didn't really want to stay there. I wanted to find other things I wanted to do. I feel like I could add a value outside of the business in some form, but didn't know what it was. Someone came in to talk about neurodiversity, and I was intrigued and curious. And from that, group of us co-founded the Neurodiverse ERG, which is Employee Resource Group within GSK, which was just a small group on one site. And it kind of, due to COVID, exploded to a global group. Wow. That ends up, when I left, there's about 750 plus members of advocates, people that recognized and identified as being neurodivergent or neurodiverse, leaders who wanted to know what to do to support, and this was across multiple European countries, Latin America, the US, UK. But at the same time, just going back to that question you asked around what was one of the key aspects. One of the key aspects is, as I progressed my career, I started to get a bit irritated. When you've been in an organization, and I'm probably going to be the last of the Mohicans when it comes to my career in terms of staying one organization, even if you have multiple roles. I think a lot of people are moving from organizations, and I'd highly recommend people look outside that box. There's so much more advantageous stuff that opportunities I probably missed out. And again, that may be because of my ND and my confidence and strength awareness. But the one good thing about staying in organizations, you see the cycle. And I started seeing the cycle in terms of D&I stuff, topics. And there's one particular call where we were talking to, and I didn't realize there was senior leaders and the senior sponsors, with senior VPs on the call. And I had a bit of a rant when we had some new people coming in who were young and fresh and had the internet, knew how to change things, talking about all this tech and all these initiatives. And I came on the call and I was like, I'm really sorry. Great, great for you guys to come with these, but we've done them all. And I'm tired. And I've been in my job for X amount of years, and I haven't had a promotion, and I haven't seen this. And I vocalized it, and I then had a whole load of messages directly to me, because we've got like an internal message of saying, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. Thank you, I feel seen and heard. And that's when I realized the impact. On top of that, my senior VP for my department happened to be the sponsor and grabbed me on the call afterwards and said, I see you, and I've been watching you. We've actually been watching you and seeing the stuff that you've been doing. But I said, I didn't know you were watching me, and you haven't had this conversation with me to support me in my career. And that's when I started to make a decision that I have been there long enough to aggravate it. I have a privilege in terms of, if they made me redundant, I would get a lovely package. FYI, I didn't get that package financially, just to note for people. But I would have got, so I was like, I'm going to be absolutely unapologetic I'm going to tell them when they're doing things wrong. I'm going to make sure, because I want this organization to thrive. The one comment I said when I moved out of microbiology was, and even I was in different roles within that department, was where am I adding value in that role? Where am I adding value in my supportive project management role? Where am I adding value in project management? Where am I adding value within my department? Where am I adding value within GSK in D&I space? And then it got to a point when I decided to leave where I was like, where am I adding value outside of this space? Because it's not necessarily listening. And it's that passion, it's that kind of like actually strength and awareness of actually, if I do say this, nothing really bad is going to happen. And actually, I might get people to listen because I've been here long enough and I know what the hell I'm talking about. And I'm realizing my value, my impact, that's probably the best thing. And as I have been disclosing this quietly on all platforms, I then ended up leaving and then going through my ADHD journey, and now have been formally diagnosed with ADHD 20 years after my diagnosis for dyslexia.
Wow. And that's a long journey. And that diagnosis didn't just impact you, because it actually changed how you saw yourself in your work. And then also you've used that to impact others with the neurodiversity network at GSK, which 750 people. Was that 750?
Yeah. And it's probably more now because there was people underneath. I mean, it got to the point where, you know, I'd be called, like, people, you know, the thing about visibility is that once you're out there, it's a different game. And I think one thing, and you know, you've talked about it so much about visibility, particularly for Black women or minority women, is it's a bit scary. Because first of all, it's like whatever you put out there, especially now on the internet, you can't retract. So it's really important to say that really have those strong boundaries about what you want to put out there and what you don't. And as someone who's an oversharer, believe it or not, I have spent time that is strategic and intentional when I've put things out there about my personal life, because I know the value and impact it has, and I'm willing to take the bullet for the people behind me who are not, but need that support and awareness. But once you put yourself out there, it's interesting to see how other leaders and other people who are bigger in your organization or bigger in your networks come out of the woodworks. I had so many opportunities once I said that, of meeting, like I got to meet the CEO, I got to meet people on the board, and we're talking about an international global pharmaceutical organization. And I was very strategic. So when, for example, they talked about race and mental health with Emma Walmsley, I actually added an ND twist. Next thing I know, there's a massive campaign internally about neurodiversity. And I was like, that's based on my comment. And people were messaging me going, oh, because it seems so like, convenient that suddenly talk, and suddenly they've got this
what a coincidence.
Oh yeah, one stop. It only lasted for a few days, comms, that they, again, did not put me in. They did not ask me my support. They didn't even consult with me about it. It just went out. And I had to take that as a silent win. So the value you can bring about the things that you're really interested in, you have to think about whether you got the energy. Alliances and collaboration is key. I had white males in my team. I had it wasn't just minorities within that core foundation group. And I was very intentional around that. I had someone who was neurotypical, who was helped running and setting up that team, because I knew that we would be up in the air and way too energized and way too close to it to be really strategic with it, with what the business's lab language was. So things like that are really, really important.
Right. And I can see how that has shaped you. And from that, you went on and you launched Thinking Like Coach. When you think about what drove you to actually launch that, what was missing in the support systems that you experienced that said, this is what I need to do for others, because this is what I needed 10 years ago?
So within my organization, they were already having a company do coaching internally. I had some sessions. It just didn't work out for me. It wasn't really helpful. But some of the people, my colleagues, were saying this is really helpful. And I was like, great. I took a step back and I was like, okay, we've got a big company. It's international. It's got loads of money. I was also very close working with the disability group and the person who was doing all the kind of like accessibility tools on all different sites. So he was starting to go into Canada, into India, into Poland. So I was very, very close with him. It was absolutely fantastic work that he'd done in GSK and outside. But one of the things I noticed was, even when these organizations had all this tech and all these things available for accessibility, the individuals that I was talking to were still really struggling. And one independent individual who was a part of a founder group was really struggling with his diagnosis. A lot of the founders who were in that group had gone for a diagnosis for X and came out with Y. Some of them had gone through it with their kids and then found that they had it. So it was the typical what we hear now, but back then there wasn't really a space. People weren't talking about sending their child to get diagnosed and then finding out that actually they need to go for a diagnosis out of those conversations. That was all new. And he was really struggling. But the biggest thing is he was struggling about, he had this 20-year career that he obviously was doing really well. And he was questioning why he's working there and that he wasn't good enough. It was consistent. Every time I checked in with him every 6 months or said, are you going to come to a meeting? Over the spans of 5 years, it was still the same doubt. And I said, something isn't working. Simultaneously, I was doing more mentoring and moving into coaching space. I decided to get qualified as an ICF coach, which is an international coaching associate. And as I was seeing some of those techniques around the questioning and the exploration, I realized that actually this is the missing piece, because the tools and everything are great, but if the person doesn't know what they need or how to explore and understand what is challenging them, understanding where their strengths lie, going out and putting it into the field, testing, getting data points, which I talk about a lot, then you don't really know how it impacts you. You're just looking at what you see as a standard template for dyslexia, ADHD, autism, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and thinking, oh, I tick that box, that must be my issue. And so with coaching, we really, if you're looking for a really authentic, neurodivergent, neurodiverse coach, they're really taking you for who you are at your point.
Right.
That shot where you are now, because you're going to show up with all sorts. And sometimes a challenge with one dyslexic person isn't going to challenge somebody else who's dyslexic, for example. So it's making you take down those walls. And that is so important with everything at the moment with social media and neurodiversity, especially ADHD and autism, where people are just self-recognizing themselves. But when you bring them into your space and create the safety for them to explore, it does look different.
Right.
It's okay, because these are true things and they're challenges that you experience. Let's explore it and see what we can put in place. And that was the key in the shift, where I could add the value to my community. And hopefully in the future, I aim to be able to give more resource to the Black community who have additional challenges, whether it's cultural, religious, all the other things that can make us as complex when it comes to working in the Western world, particularly, and making space for them.
I smile because, and it's not a smile of, this is funny. It's that smile of recognition where you hear people like, oh, my child can't have ADHD or neurodiversity. We'll pray it away. And I'm like, it's not a demon. No. Stop it. It's not any of those things. Behave. But what I'm so glad is that there are people like you now who are having those conversations. And so parents are seeing someone like you and all the other people who look like us, who are having those discussions. And so now it's giving them room to say, I can have those discussions. And it's giving those parents the permission to have those discussions and feel like they can come to a safe space to have them. So, and I think this is why when we normally talk about representation matters, especially in the parts of mental health and mental wellness, representation is key.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's another reason why I decided to leave GSK and do what I do, because there wasn't many Black coaches that were in that space. And just for everybody listening, I did a lot of advocacy stuff on behalf of GSK. So I was talking externally about neurodiversity on behalf of GSK. I was liaising with loads of advocates around it as a representative of GSK to understand. And there's a lovely community of some amazing advocates from our community of trying to do things all over the UK and internationally. And I did take a time to think and say, okay, there's people doing that. Where do I add value? Where's my spot? Because I don't want to dilute it to the point where there's so many people and people don't see themselves. And I really was intentional to say, actually, some of those don't have the corporate background that I have. They come from either the psychology background or the educational background where they're dealing mainly with children. I want to deal with the adults. I want to deal with the ones like me who got missed, who are struggling. And I want to also show and celebrate their achievements, because if you've got that parent saying, I'm going to pray ADHD out of you, well, I want to show that I've got ADHD and look how my career has been. Look how much I've achieved. And that's without even knowing I had it. So you could imagine, with you just giving that support to your child, what they can do and how they can achieve as a community. And also another thing that you talk very much around is community. The more we can talk about it, the more that we can build that community, and we can start supporting each other without there being this, well, I've got to pray, and then someone else with their children might be thinking, well, I've got to pray because that person was praying. Maybe that's what I need to do. Actually, no, we're coming from the strength view, not the deficit view.
Yes.
We're looking at support view, and then we're coming together to say, in our community, I have more of an understanding of what you may go through as a Black woman or as an Asian woman or as a Polish woman, or whatever, minority we're talking about. Okay, what can we do to support you?
Yeah.
What can we do to have that discussion, break those boundaries down?
And you know what? And that's so true. And when we start looking at the work that you're doing, going back to it, we're talking about your work catches the cognitive strengths that are missed, often overlooked, and especially misunderstood, especially for those from our communities, especially when we find out that children right now who have ND in the different guises that it shows up in schools, they're not identified. They're seen more as troublemakers, whereas children from other communities are given that leeway to say, oh, it's neurodiversity, but children from the minorities are labeled. And so having that representation is really going to matter. And while we're talking about that element of that whole cognitive strengths being misunderstood, being overlooked, what were some of yours and how did you come to embrace it?
So I've always been labeled sensitive, right? So I was like crocodile tears, which probably everybody heard of. You got crocodile tears, you cry over everything, you're very sensitive. And I realized as I got older that my sensitivity is actually very much self-reflection and empathy.
Right.
There's some NDs actually who physically will feel the pain that the person's going through. They're that sensitive. I don't necessarily have those, and they have those physical feelings. So if someone's like burning themselves and crying, they will feel physically in their body a burning sensation. That's that's how it can be to some, and that can make them feel overwhelmed. But there were things like empathy. I think there was this, and you probably hear it from a lot of people who identify as being neurodivergent, it's kind of like this social aspect of not quite knowing what a group of people may be discussing in terms of non-verbal cues. And one of the things I'm going to bring in, and I know Lillian's going to laugh, is anime. We were talking about it just before. I mean, if you've watched us on social media, you know I love the anime. But one of the things I was saying that's I find really fascinating, and I think it may draw a lot of that NDs too, is because particularly anime, other than other kind of cartoons, we're talking about animations, a particular genre of animations. With anime, there's a lot of internal dialogue. So there's an action where it's a fight, or they may do something, and then they have an internal reflection, and that is vocalized. And that is something that a lot of NDs, it's like data that we're missing. That really helps us understand relationships and interactions. So that's probably why people, and so those kind of things, I think, are things that can be challenging. But then I think what moves into the strength aspect is that people realizing that there's empathy, there's this kind of strength in pattern recognition. Because if you don't understand, the secret source of the social norms, you're looking for patterns. Generally, as children develop, they use mimicking from the people around them, their community around them, to develop their social skills, their communication skills. With ND individuals, that's probably used a lot more deeper in terms of looking for those patterns, and then they translate into other things. So
Right.
you've got a lot of NDs who can be employed in places like the defense because they're really, really sharp at facial recognition, certain patterns.
Interesting.
When I had my dyslexic test, one of the tests they do is pattern recognitions and sequences and things like that, because there is a logical aspect to sometimes the way that our brains can work, or a creative way. I say logic because I think that's what people could probably understand it from, an analytical way of how we would get to our outcome.
Yeah.
And one of the things that sometimes we can be good at is actually getting to it a lot quicker than everybody else. That then causes frustration because we're like, why are you taking so long? Because we're already there at the end.
Yeah.
Particularly in the workplace, a lot of my clients say that they're like, oh my God, I've already got to that conclusion and I'm now waiting for you to get there. Or I'm not quite clear around your why. Like, why are you asking me to do this? There must be more information I need to know, because that information actually helps me be able to deliver what I need to deliver. Yeah. So for me, that why was really important. And I found that I had to battle with that in the corporate space, because not everything you need to know, you can know. And then the second bit was around the strengths. And yeah, so it can be really difficult for people to understand and have that information. A lot of times they don't have that information in the corporate space and have to work around ambiguity. So I think one of the strengths is particularly for those who haven't been diagnosed, is being able to navigate in that space. And I'm afraid also for me, the one last strength, I suppose, is, other than pattern recognition and empathy, is probably also I share a lot. I think people may say it's not a strength, but there is a lot of intention around sharing my story and speaking about things. And that empathy on a different level, where I'm doing it potentially in my mind, I always think I'm doing it to be able to make space for somebody else who isn't in a position to be able to share. And that's really important for me. And I think that's where my strengths probably lie. I don't necessarily call them superpowers. I know it's a bit of a mix between people saying they're superpowers and not, because there's a lot of challenges that come with some of those things that like showing up.
Right.
I think these are strengths that allow me to be able to show up the way I can. And just to let everybody know, if you've got any people that are listening that either new to diagnosis or younger people, parents and friends that are sharing this, individuals that are younger, it grows as you get older. It develops over time. You don't wake up and suddenly have these strengths or even understand or identify them. As your journey goes, these will develop, so give yourself grace.
Exactly. And I will say, I can't speak for what it's like for someone in the diverse community, so I'm not going to try to speak for them, but I'll say this, that the same way we didn't drop out of our mothers knowing how to walk and talk, the same way their strengths are going to grow. It's skill in action, and the more you use it, the more you slowly begin to understand it. So I think that that's really good advice. And when you think back, when you look at your corporate life and think about your clients that you currently work with, what does a truly neuro-inclusive workplace look and feel like? Not the policy version, not something on a white paper, the real skinny, what would it have to look like?
It's so interesting because I don't have a HR background. So one of the things I do as well as coaching is I do some training. I also talk in organizations, and I do consultancy. And when I do the consultancy bit, I make it very clear I'm not HR, I don't do policies, because I know that is a very tricky area. And the reason I'm mentioning it now is because I think that's what people wanted, the policies, everything in place to align with the disability narrative and the way that D&I has currently worked. And I always say to people, to organizations, businesses, whether they're big corporate organizations or whether they're just a high street coffee shop, it's about culture. It's about how people feel. So even within my business, I look at how I'm neuro-inclusive, bearing in mind the people that support my business are identified being neurotypical. Because it's really important about how we work and leverage on a strength-based base. What I'm finding the shift now entering 2026, and it's so timely that we're having this discussion now because things have changed, particularly last year with all the noise around neurodivergence was around, okay, we've got awareness, but now what?
Yeah.
And it's that culture building. And we assume that it's different than any other D&I topic. We assume that there must be something different, right? You know, you can't treat it like your gender, you can't treat it like sexual orientation, you can't treat it like race.
Yes.
But actually, it's very similar. The basics, the foundations are still there. Neuro-inclusive is creating that space where people feel comfortable to show up and do the best they want to do at work. I would assume most people, when they've got a job, they want to do well. Whether they want to do it to get paid, they want to do it to get a promotion, they might be other reasons personally why they want to do it. But they usually want to show up at work because they want to do well. There are people that go into jobs and they really like, I'm just sliding and gliding, and they don't, but majority do. And so when it means doing that, they want to do it the most natural, most comfortable way for them. If you've got a group of people and ask them, okay, how would you want to show up at work? And just say, give them options like tick a box if you'd like to wear your gym jams, or tick a box whether you would like to have a headset and the AirPods in. Tick a box if you'd like to work in a room or would like to work in an open plan. There'll be variety, but there's certain things that we would be drawn to. And I think COVID absolutely blew the top of that from a corporate perspective, and in even some small businesses around us redefining what that working looks like. Yeah. And when we're looking at working, we're also looking at what productivity looks like, what spaces look like, and re-challenging and re-exploring what that is for everybody. And I think that's the key. So it doesn't matter when you come to my space, whether you identify or not. I mean, I've coached people that were from anywhere. It didn't have to be neurodivergent. When I first did coaching, I did not want to niche. And I kind of found my space and got in, and I was like, no, this is the space I need to be in. But whether you identify, whether you've had a diagnosis, formal diagnosis or not, it's absolutely irrelevant, because it's about you showing up where you are. And me creating that space through the guidance, through the questioning, through the support to help you navigate that. And that's what a neuro-inclusive business looks like, or community culture looks like, is creating a space where people can say, I'm really struggling with this. Is there someone who can give me help? And that may not be the manager, that might be somebody else.
Yeah,
it's for a manager to be like, actually, I might not be the best person for you. Let's see if there's anything else that we can have in the business, because a lot of managers are taking it on board themselves, and they're not in a position to be able to do and promise these things to individuals. It's for organizations to say, look, our budgets are cut, and this is so much we can do, and this is what we can help on this part. And hopefully as we develop, we can introduce this part. Is that okay? Can that help support you? And it may not be perfect. We need to understand that it's not going to be perfect. It might be imperfect, but the opening up and the conversations and the co-creation is where the neuro-inclusivity comes, where you've got teams of all different intersectionalities, all different differences, all different disabilities, neurodivergent, neurotypes, all differences are coming together and are able to say, when I get up in the morning and I go and do X, run my business, go to work at a small business, work at a corporate, run a business, I am been able to show up at my best. I'm able to be productive the way that I feel, with my balance of sustainability over a period of time, with me having energy for the things I care about, and being able to give back and make an impact at the time and the speed that and the pacing that I want. And that is what we want. And I think sometimes we think that's not possible. And I think we don't possible because there are some people that have manipulated and structured the way that the working world has been, and we know the history around that.
Yes.
And I think we're getting to that point where we're starting to explore a little bit, dipping our toes into the water, saying, what would it be like if I was to do that? And creating small little places in organizations to try it out. And I think we'll be quite surprised with what we find.
I think you've kind of touched on it in a roundabout way. You know that popular saying, they say culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you have your culture right, where everybody feels accepted, everyone feels that they're allowed to bring their best self there and they are seen, heard, and held, your strategy is not going to be an issue.
And the thing about it is people will come along with you if you create that space.
If you create that culture, you will have the most engaged, loyal supportive community of people who are working with you, not for you. And this is the thing that corporates, I don't think, have fully cracked yet. Some companies have cracked that code. The rest, well, they'll get there.
I think also we have to be mindful that we're thinking about the way that things have evolved over time and our generational differences. That makes it to be different. You've got boomers and Gen X's who are, working. We know that that's changing now. Millennials and Gen Zs are becoming the larger portion of the working community. But we've got very shifts in mindsets. If we go back to neurodiversity, we've got very different mindsets around that versus what Gen X is, what Gen Zs and millennials are feeling around the topic and D&I topics and things like that. So I think there's an aspect of saying that's where we want to go. That's the utopia. But in the meantime, let's just sit together, because Jo does not want to have the heating on at 21 degrees because she's freezing. But Phil is like, I want the aircon on because I'm too hot. And we need to come to that space where there's a communication, a conversation, and a kind of like, okay, can we switch it on in the morning to warm up the space and then switch it off? And a way of adapting and collaborating and co-creating.
That each person can thrive.
Key. Yeah, I think that's the key in this evolution of creating that culture of neuro-inclusivity. And so the strategy is that we're not going to get to that complete, everybody's farming in a circle. We've done that in the 70s and 60s. Everybody's in a circle. We're not going to get there. That's not where we are right now. And in the world we live in, it's definitely not going to happen. But I think there are spaces to say, actually, I had a session with the manager this morning, and one of the things we said was, do you ask your team what their thoughts are when you propose something? She's great at proposing something, great at putting herself in their position. But let them tell you what they like, don't like. Let them tell you what's showing up for them. Let them take accountability to co-create their part of that. Because it's just yours, and you put so much pressure on yourself to create this thing when you don't even know what they want, and they haven't even thought about it.
Exactly. And that's where I'd say reverse mentoring should be something that is rolled out in every organization. Because you then imagine that you take on reverse mentoring, but then you do reverse mentoring to understand neurodiversity from the people who are actually dealing with it from their point of view, especially from the Gen Z and millennials, to see how is it really impacting them. So you don't create something for them, you create something with them.
And that should happen under every D&I topic. And we have done that under some and not others. I don't understand, and I don't have the logic in my pattern recognition brain to understand why we do it in some and not others. But particularly, I had that. So someone did reverse mentoring with me. I picked up the topic and said, this is a topic that's close to me, neurodiversity. And they learned so much and started to incorporate that in their team because of just one or two conversations I had with a senior VP who wasn't anybody to do with my line. It was somebody I knew, but nothing to do with my line. And then indirectly became a sponsor for me in terms of my career progression. So again, this is a small way where someone who doesn't think they're going to make an impact can just have a conversation about the experience. And that is enough to add value to somebody else's experience and knowledge. And if you are an older person, I'm an elder millennial. I make it very proud that I'm an elder millennial, going on to potentially Gen X. But if you are an older person and you think you're the bee's knees and you know it all, and I tell you what, talk to Gen Z. I truly believe talking to someone from a different generation, if you're wartime, talk to someone who's Gen X. If you're Gen Z, talk to someone who's wartime. Just everybody needs to kind of have those conversations because you will learn so much. And then it will really challenge and explore how your mind has its own perceptions. You understand your biases. There's nothing wrong with us. We all have biases, but we just need to be aware of those so that see how that navigates in our space. And then you really understand neurotypes, not neurodiversity, not neurodivergence, just different neurotypes on a completely different level.
Right. And I think that will just change the conversation. And speaking of the neurotypes and speaking of neurodiversity, the one thing that we've seen in the last couple of years, especially last year, you couldn't pick a rock up and throw it into cyberspace, online, social media without somebody talking about neurodiversity. And everybody was self-diagnosed and everybody's like, oh yeah, I do X, Y, and Z. I'm neurodiverse. And some of it, people were using it to explain their behavior, especially when it wasn't positive behavior. They were using it to explain their behavior. How would you, as an advocate, as a woman who is neurodiverse, when you see that, first of all, what's your reaction? And secondly, can this whole thing about this everybody's self-diagnosing as neurodiverse, if everyone is self-diagnosing as neurodiverse, then is it that there is no neurotypical people, or what is happening?
Good question. I love this question. So I'm going to start with the first one. What do I see? It depends who it comes from. I'm the person, so when it comes to social media, I do like a bit of social media. I look at it from an interest in people, from a psychology perspective. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm very interested in people.
Yeah.
Even going back to adverts and things and how they get you to buy things and purchase things. I've always been like that as a child. What I find really interesting is when I have certain types of people, particularly celebrities and stuff like that, who are saying I've got ADHD, or I think I've got ADHD, or I've got autism, etc. And I always want to understand the underlying narrative around that. There's been a couple of documentaries came out last year around ADHD specifically, around, and one that was kind of reinvigorated around autism, which was slightly better because they had actually had some autistic presenters who weren't well known actually go through that process, which I thought was really quite good. The ADHD one had a couple of people that were just kind of like advocates, but more in the starstruck space.
Right.
And I have to admit, even as someone who's ND, I sometimes go, oh, God, not another one. Like if I find someone on a soap or, you know, a TV show series that comes out and said, oh yeah, I was like, really? And it really is frustrating, because if I feel that way, God knows how everybody else is feeling who don't identify or is struggling to identify, or has a child who is showing that symptoms and try to dismiss it, feel about that topic. And I think that has been what I say the pendulum, because there's always a pendulum. I think we're at the peak of the pendulum where the awareness has exploded.
Yeah.
And there's so much in there. I have watched products and services and coaches and trainers change the narrative of what they provide to add in ADHD. I'm like, you did not have that when I first contacted and looked into you X amount of years ago, and now you suddenly put that word in.
Yeah.
I'm very dubious about it. And as someone who has created a business around supporting all across all neurotypes, but all neurodivergent, what we typically say is neurodivergent, or supposedly the majority of neurodivergent neurotypes, because there's some others that sit under mental health that people don't realize sit under that umbrella of neurodiversity, neurodivergence as well. Like there's some mental health, bipolar, OCD, technically. So as someone who's built a business around that space, it is really frustrating that every coach and their mum are ADHD coaches. And it really scares me, because then it does two things. It makes it saturated, and it also means that the person looking for support doesn't know who to go to. And it dilutes the trust. And in coaching, just like you have in therapy, just like you have in counseling or anything else, trust is so important, because people are being vulnerable. And this is probably one of the most vulnerable things they are. I was very vocal about my autoimmune issues, my fertility issues, very vocal. The one thing that I was not vocal about was my neurodiversity in the beginning. So you can see how sensitive that is to a lot of people. There's other things that I can talk about, endometriosis, I can talk about minor disabilities. Oh yeah, that's all seen. Even when it wasn't discussed, perimenopause wasn't a big thing, but I felt like I could talk about some of the things I was talking about. They were body things. People could understand that. I was going to see a doctor about that. It was a medical thing. The brain, oh. And that's the bit where people really struggle now, because they're trying to find a space they can trust. And there's 110 million people out there
talking about it.
Having that I can fix you narrative, which is so wrong and so dangerous. I had the privilege, and I put some investment into working with one of the top two, I would say, professors in the landscape in the UK. Nancy and Doyle and Ahmet McDowell were my professors when I did my postgrad in neurodiversity coaching in the workplace. And the thing about doing a postgrad is it's not like a degree. You don't just get papers and read it. You have to go and interrogate, be curious, explore, And we had loads of different topics. One of them was intersectionality and what that means as a Black woman, because that's where it came from, but also where it's diluted and now moved to other spaces. But one of the things we talked about was terminology and labels. And the thing that we're talking about is, are we getting to that point where the labels may not exist? Are we getting to the point where neurodivergence might not be a divergence? It might end up being the majority, not the minority. Are we doing a bit where we're starting to understand a bit about how the brain works for different people as a difference? So that's one thing that's still being explored in the research space. The good thing about the noise is it's creating people that want to put funding towards getting research to look at things like women with NDs, minorities, across things like physical fatigue and cognitive fatigue, which is going to add value. But for the everyday person, it can be a lot. And I always say to everybody that comes to me is do your due diligence, go and talk to people, go and talk to therapists or coaches, ask them about how they're going to be supporting you and create that and make sure you've got that real safe space before you put any money into any pocket.
That's great advice.
Yeah, because I mean, I probably, business people don't shoot me, because you're probably like Danielle, but I always say to anyone, come talk to me, go and talk to others. Have you talked to other coaches other than me? And if you haven't, go do it. And if you're a Black woman, find a white guy. And if you're a white person, go and find a minority, because you just don't know who's that person that's going to click for you in terms of the support and that safe space. There may be something just something about that person that clicks with you,
right?
That creates that safety you need to be able to go on this journey. And that is such a sacred space that should be honored and protected. So don't go by the glossy stuff. And also some of the training that's out there are done for people that really have no idea. It's really difficult. I think your second question was around the labels. And I mentioned a little bit about the labels.
Yes.
And whether people are self-diagnosing and what it means for the label. And I think, we've had a brand new label come up, which is ADHD alt, or AD alt, which is
What's
ADHD and autism, which people thought you can't have ADHD and autism, you can only have one or the other. And that was a new label that only come out the last couple of years. If you were looking at the sector or 3-4 years ago, that wouldn't have even existed. And that in itself is showing the change. I think it's 30% of people with dyslexic have ADHD or the other way around. There's also, I think 20% of people dyslexic have dyscalculia, which is similar to dyslexia in terms of troubles with grammar, but with numbers. There are so many comorbidities in that space where I think people are starting to take a step back and think, what are we labeling here? Now, there's one thing I want to put a caveat, a massive caveat. I talked to a lot of Black advocates in this space around this. Labels are useful. They create community. They create belonging. They create a sense of this is this entity, the same way that some, Americans say they're Afro-Americans. Some people say they're Black British, Caribbean. We can all just say we're Black. But we have these labels to collective identity. And they're really useful in creating and connecting with others who have a similar identity or feeling as we have. So they are really important, particularly in the minorities where we're really dealing with so much. That label was important.
Yes.
But when it comes to the support you get, the research we're looking in, I really think we need to think about it in terms of a cognitive view and across cognitive intersections, because that's actually going to give us a bit more information. And remember, just because someone has a label, they're not always necessarily the same as another person with the same label. And so that is really important. So I think the pendulum started to come down a little bit where people are challenging it. They're curious, they're exploring it. And I'm hoping that it will come down a little bit because people are not coming and saying, yeah, this is what shows up to me. I've got ADHD, I've got problems with procrastination. Sometimes my brain's all over the place. Sometimes I internalize my sensation. Those are the things we want to hear because those are things that we can support.
Yes.
The overarching labels are really hard to support because we don't know what that means for you.
This is good to know, and this is actually very useful. And I think the more the discussion, like you said, it should be across the cognitive development as a whole to get the funding and to be able to have that space to have those conversations. Because if you have the different labels solely, and the more you have labels, the more you create this divide. And where do we stop?
Yeah, there's a massive shift a couple of years ago with autistic training programs or autistic inclusion programs. And a lot of organizations got their got strapped and got a negative response because it's like, okay, but what about the dyslexics, the people with ADHD, the people with dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and all the other things that sit under the umbrella? So it's really difficult. And I think, again, we need to work on where we're at and not expect everything to be just magically sorted. So for individuals listening to this podcast, they need to understand that we haven't figured it out. Experts like me, we're still learning and exploring and having those conversations. So don't expect to go into an organization or go to a space and then have it all figured out. We're experts and we still haven't. But what you can do is you can self-advocate for the things that you need. You can look at things that are challenging you. You can co-create spaces. These are things where you've got influence and impact. And you can be mindful that the other person may not have the capabilities or the finance or the capacity to help you. But again, we're talking about it being collaborative and co-creation. Co-creation is key.
I love that. And co-creation is a key to so many things, but that's a whole nother conversation that will happen. Danielle, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show. And there are a few more questions that I want to ask. On the show, we always talk about here on In Her Own Name, we talk about reclamation. We talk about that reclamation of voice, space, identity. So let's talk about this. When was that moment in your life, your work, where you felt yourself stop shrinking? You felt yourself really step into, first of all, your own name, your own truth, and your full self?
So I've already talked about one of them, which was that call. And to add some content to that call, I was literally listening to the call when I was going for a walk. I physically ran home to log onto my work computer to go and make that comment to them about, we've done that, we need something different. And that was when I really felt in my truth.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was thinking. I probably wasn't thinking very much. I would just like do, and I had the passion drive around it. And maybe also the kind of like, oh, I've heard it already type mentality. People underestimate that. People think, oh, I've heard it already, and then have a whinge. Take that flame. That flame can be useful if it's put in a positive way to be able to feedback and ignite things. And I think where I felt myself probably as is where I probably am now. I did not have the greatest start to my business career, so I left GSK. I sacrificed financially a lot because I'd made the decision to go after being there for so long. I had planned myself to be able to do that, so I was very privileged, but I still had lost a lot in that.
Yeah.
The identity of being someone who'd always worked in project management, and a Black female working in a space, a Black scientist, all these kind of things that made up Danielle's working identity and going into this world of business. I've never done a business. I had a separate business, but very offhand, nothing. I didn't have to be involved in anything. And then I got sick. I got sick as soon as I left. I decided to just take myself off on a holiday. I got sick, really badly sick. Someone say it's probably a purge of all the stress for years that came out of the phone. But unfortunately, that summer of my first year of working full-time in my business, I got pneumonia and I was off sick for 2 months. I was in and out of A&E hospital. And that was something that it just happened. And so that was a recovery. That was, how do I manage that? And I think one of the points was sitting in my hospital bed, realizing that I had support to help my business. I did have some support through the amazing access to work funding. If you're an entrepreneur, business owner, if you have a disability or neurodivergent, access to work funding to get a support worker it can be business changing. I had them there, and I sat there thinking, I'm not stressed, because I'd been sick multiple times in and out A&E hospital for years in my role, and I've been sitting there thinking about how I'm going to do this project, what I'm going to do, I don't know, imposter syndrome and anxiety. I sat there in my business where I am accountable, saying, I've got my contract signed, my clients know I'm not well, we don't know when I'm going to be back, and it's okay, and I felt at ease. And then I went into the highs and lows emotionally of getting back into work and building it up. Last year, touch wood, I was good. I had some mental health stuff that showed up, had some other things that were kind of insightful in my life last year. But I started to realize that I am accepting where I am and who I am and how I show up for my community, how I show up for my clients, how I show up for my business, how I show up for me. And that's probably where I felt more at ease And interestingly, again, the timing for this is perfect because interestingly, I did a little bit of work over Christmas and strategy and stuff. But now I'm easing into January. I'm probably easing into January the best I ever had in my working career.
That's nice.
Because the pressure has been released. I know what I need to do. I know it will come. I know that I'll be able to be successful. I'll be able to do things I need to do, and slowing it down and pacing it for me. So working around, not comparing myself to other people in business who've been doing it for years, not comparing myself to other coaches because I know the value to my clients. I'm really pacing with what my body and what I need as a business owner, as someone who's ND.
I love that, especially that pacing, because especially at the start of every new year, we go into this frenzy, and we've had that conversation outside of this where we talk about personally what that looks like for each of us. And I gave up the new year, new me struggle a while back because I'm like, well, the person that went through the whole year learned a lot of lessons. I'm not going to abandon her to the wild in the name of new year, new me. And secondly, this is not the new year. I mean, on a cyclical basis, this is not the new year, but that's just my point of view. And so I love that you have made that pacing. You're very intentional about that pacing for yourself. And you spoke, going back to something that you said about you sharing, is that sharing gives other people the permission to do the same.
Yeah.
And that's the power of your sharing. It's the permission it gives others. And I thought I should really go back to that because that was something that was really key. And I think that in itself, when you do that work, when you say, I'm pacing myself for the year, it gives other people the space to do this. It's okay if I don't have it together in the first 30 days of January when it's freezing outside and all I want to do is pull the blanket over my head.
I have to also add to that two things. One, there is a level of privilege that comes with certain pacing. And I don't want to underline that. There's financial, there is health, there is all sorts of privileges comes with pacing. So pacing has to be personal to you and what shows up for you. Me having time off over Christmas was intentional, but also was in a position where I was able to do that. So that's number one for people who are listening and maybe rolling their eyes up at me, because it doesn't mean you can't do it. I challenge you to do it differently and do it for you. And the second thing is this hustle culture. Now, I know that we're starting to see a shift, particularly in Gen Zs, around hustle, hustle, hustle. Millennials, we've been there. But the hustle culture was very different with tech and AI.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing them starting to talk about slow offline, there's club nights where you don't take your phone out. I mean, we used to go out, we really didn't have phones.
So, horror. Wait, you don't take your phone? Oh my God, that is, of course, that has never happened.
Take pictures. I mean, we just, as a generation who's gone from, millennials stuff have gone, and probably culturally and technology and everything, or life-wise, have been in the biggest transition. Our parents and grandparents have never been and never will be connected in the transition that we have been. And the Gen Zs will never be in that transition that we have been in. So we're sitting there laughing and going, huh?
I am tail end Gen X. So basically the internet, I still remember a time where I have to go to the library to find information. And I know what to do with a rotary phone. But at the same time, I was at the cusp of the birth of the internet and all of that. And so we have lived through that. So when I see people talk about, oh my God, I'm getting a Walkman, and I'm like, great, but I'm like, damn, if I knew I would have kept my Walkman, I would have got £400 for it. Exactly. I'd have gotten £1,000 from my Walkman.
Get rid of my CDs.
I still have some of those. I actually want to teach a class on how to save a cassette with a pen and sell it as a kit.
There's a lot of TikToks about that, which I find hilarious, and how tap water didn't kill us. But I think there's something around us also understanding that's where we're seeing the transition and the implementation of pacing. Because we've got a generation who, one thing that we will not have experienced was growing up with only knowing tech and having all that information, all that comparison. I would compare myself maybe to my neighbor and the people at school. Now I'm comparing myself to 100 million people on the internet that I have no way of having that dialogue around to really understand. If I got a nice new dress, and my friend's looking at me with eagle eyes, I'm literally with her seeing the eagle eyes. We
Yeah.
can have a battle, we can have an argument, and then we can resolve it in that moment. You can't have that battle and argument on the internet, and if you do, it's trolling. So
Yeah.
if you're not having that conflict resolution in a one-to-one basis, and so there's loads of extra energy and nervousness around that piece.
Oh, yeah.
And then what we're having now is a generation who's understanding, actually, I need to pace myself. But also, unfortunately for them, they're in a space where society's gone, and some people that find it advantageous are gone, we love that you're hustling. So we're now going to make everybody else hustle, and we're not going to let you stop and pace yourself. So they're now battling with trying to look after their well-being, trying to pace themselves, and the expectation of being young and going for it.
Yeah.
And
no, there's definitely that. And, the case in point of what you said about saying, oh, I have a dress and my friend is looking at me a sort of way, you can have a one-to-one discussion and argument. Now, if we were doing this and we are on social media doing this, what happens is no longer a one-to-one conversation. Then we have camps, and then everybody throws in their 2 cents, and before you know it, it's this big amorphous thing that then follows you for almost the rest of your life. So yes, I know we jest about this, but no, I am so glad that the Gen Zs are now, and the later millennials are now like, we don't want to participate in this anymore.
Yeah. I really love that generation. I'm very vocal about loving that generation. There's something about them, and I know I'm being very generic and very kind of overarching, and we have, pros and cons in all generations. But there's something about the generation where they're like, that's not fair and that's not right. And I think it may be the exposure of information and getting access to information straight away, but they're actually challenging. Where we would probably say that's not right, but then we're alone. There's something about actually having that community saying that's not right together.
Yeah, there's a large number.
So that's the flip side of it, where you're not standing alone if you're calling something that clearly is wrong out. And so going back to the ND space, so we're getting a lot of people saying that's not right, and therefore or that's not fair, and therefore we need to look at it differently.
Yeah. And that's a really powerful thing. And I think that is something that can only bring good, that pacing. And while we're talking about younger selves and younger people, I want you to, looking back at your younger self, what would you whisper or shout to your 18-year-old self?
Oh, 18. Oh, that was a year. I think I would probably say okay, so I call myself a weird India, because a lot of people would say, or the generic terminology that you have a lot of neurodiverse individuals say, is that I'm stupid. I thought I was stupid. I had this pull between I'm stupid and not good enough, but no, I'm not. I had a very clear, no, I'm not. I get it. I just can't. I know what you're saying. It was kind of like you talking to somebody in a different language, and you understand the other language. You understand English. You're talking back in another language. They're not understanding what you're saying, but you're like, I know what you're saying. And they're saying, yeah, well, I'm trying to say this, and you're thinking you're saying that in the other language. No, I understand you, but they don't understand you back.
Right.
So there's something in the power of knowing that I understand what you're saying, but I just can't communicate it out. I can't get that interaction out. And so I would probably say to my 18-year-old self is that you're right. You are smart. You can do it. You're going to do amazing things. I'd probably look after your mental health, pacing, manage your energy, not your time. Let things go and let things flow. And have trust in God, the universe, whatever it is you are. So I've gone through all sorts of peaks and troughs and things around religion and spirituality. Wherever you are, whatever point you are, that's where you need to be. And just, ease into it. Allow that space to be able to guide you. Your interests, follow those. Build your network. And your network can change. Not everybody's forever. People are for seasons, and that's okay. But I would probably say also, during this period of time, as you're entering your 20s and into your 30s, recognize those people that you really fill up your cup, because networking community is so key. Don't underestimate if you have a connection with somebody that may be a true connection that is there, and honor that and protect that space. And if that connection isn't there, then let it go.
Yeah.
Because I think that's when interactions and social interactions can be very hard, particularly for ND individuals. I'll probably also give some practical things like you're gonna have this thing called AI that's gonna be able to help you with grammar, so don't worry about it too much. Don't buy the book about grammar because you're not gonna read it. It's gonna collect dust. You've got dyslexia, you don't like reading. I'm not dyslexic who enjoys reading a physical book. There are some books I like, not one on grammar. Don't waste your money getting it. There's something that's gonna come that's gonna help you with all of that. And just build your network, believe in yourself. Yeah. And enjoy.
Yes.
Enjoy. Fun is so important, whatever that may look like for you. Fun is important.
You know what? That is a beautiful message to the younger self. And since we are ending on fun, let me ask you lastly, when was the last time you did something joyful that was fun, even small and surprising?
I mean, I'm not going to mention the anime day that we had again, because that was fun.
I mean, if you did mention that, I won't hold it against you.
We had it again. If you don't know about it, again, you go and check mine and Lillian's social media. You should be following Lillian anyway, listening to this, but you'll see it on my Instagram, particularly around this day. I actually have a future day coming up. So this weekend, I'm doing a digital detox. I'm going to a day retreat where I'm going to be doing a lot of sound baths and a lot of relaxation. And I'm kind of preparing for that. I'm setting myself up for preparing my meals, taking things offline. So I'm going to dust off. I can't find my Walkman, but I'm going to dust off my CD player and connect it and see if it works and play with CD. I'm not allowed to touch my phone, my laptop, anything really, my tablet, nothing digital.
Wow.
For the whole 24 hours. It's a part of this kind of movement. It's based in Europe, and they've specifically done it for that weekend, that day and Sunday. And I think that's going to be the fun because I'm going to be able to create. I'm going to be able to look at things that I enjoy from an ND space and not from a compliant, I should be doing this. I should be on social media. I'm actually going to be able to sit there and really think about what do I want to do? What is cognitively going to recover and restore? What's physically going to help me recover and restore and honor that?
I love that. And I'm thinking, where did I leave my Discman? Because I do actually have a Discman somewhere. I just need to find it.
I think I've got a mini disc. I think I've got a mini disc player. But I have to admit, I was an eBay buff, so I sold a lot of stuff on eBay. I do have CDs, and I do have a CD tape recorder that is from 2002. It still works. I still have the speakers. I just wire it all up together and put that in place. So I'm going to probably play with that. My husband's probably looking at me like I'm insane. That's fine. We're going to see if it works. And I'm going to try and post-document it or pre-document it so people can see what that means and what I felt about doing that space. Because I think as a Gen X millennial boomer who is pulled into tech, but also knows how to come off tech, I think we don't give ourselves that value to be able to, connect with those things that are offline. And actually bring some of our other younger generations and family and friends on that journey. So
that's awesome. I think share your insights, post your day. I will love to find out how that goes for you and love to see some pictures eventually. But actually enjoy that time and enjoy that day. All I can say, Danielle, is thank you so much for being on the show. You've shared so much, and we will be sharing all your links, how people can connect with you. You're on LinkedIn, you're Instagram. How would you want them to contact you? As an NDer, how do you prefer to be contacted?
So if you're listening and you want to connect, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I do say that if you're going to connect with me, if you have the opportunity to send a note, please do. So I have a bit of a context around your connection, and that really helps me connect. On Instagram, if you want, and that's more my corporate side, so you'll see a lot of me talking about the corporate side, talking about things I've done, sharing that, a bit of lived experience as well. if you want the fun side, like how my day really was, the behind the scenes of being a coach, the behind the scenes of all the wonderful things like hidden disability and neurodivergence, a bit of a laugh, and a bit more informal, then I would say go onto my Instagram at thinking like coach. I put stories, I put information on there, and it's linked to Facebook, so you can go to Thinking Like Coach on Facebook as well, because Facebook's not necessarily dead yet. I'm not on TikTok, so you won't find me on there. I have boundaries, but you have laugh and fun on Instagram. And if you feel like you want to have a deeper chat and so something inspires you to move to connect with me, there is links on both those platforms to have a free half an hour call for me to discuss about how I may be able to support you. And I just want to open up, particularly for people in the minorities who are struggling to maybe get support for a child that might be going through a diagnosis or themselves. If I'm not the right person for you, if I find that I'm not the person in education because I'm not, or if I'm not the psychologist or therapist that you need in that aspect because that's not coaching, then I am building up a library of people that I know, that I've worked with, that are massive advocates who are doing some amazing stuff in the space, who are from our community that you can connect with to get support from going forward. That is one of my strengths I did miss, was connection. So if anybody needs it, it's there.
That's amazing. So all of those links will be in the bottom of the show notes. And you know what to do. If you're still struggling to reach Danielle, drop me a message and I will put you in contact. So don't worry, you'll find ways to connect with her. And for all of you who've listened, if this show has reached you, you go, hey, I know someone that this needs to be in their earpods or anything, or they need to hear this, send them a show. Connect them to Danielle, because the more we share this, the more support NDers have and the more of the right support NDers have. And in this year and going forward, we need the right support so people have a space where they know that they can actually be their full self, be supported through their challenges, and navigating their identity as an NDer. So I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to also just add, if it's international, again, there are people that I can try and connect and relate to. So it doesn't have to be UK based, because I know the rules are different in the US and in different European countries. So I prefer if people try and connect, and I can try and connect with other people in your either local country or area that can give you support if I can't do that.
Okay, so you've heard that, and that is beautiful. So thank you. Guys, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for listening. You know what to do. Give us a like. Hit the like on Podbean, on everywhere you get your podcast. And if you want to say, yay, I know someone who's great for the show, you know what to do. Send us a message either on LinkedIn, reach out to me personally, or on Instagram, in her own name, our own Instagram on there, or reach out to me as well as Lillian Abogo, and we will get you on the show. So again, I want to say to all those who are listening, thank you for listening to my amazing guest. I'm going to say thank you and good night. Thanks for listening to In Her Own Name. Step into your week, lit up, aligned, and fully you. If you are enjoying this podcast, share it with your people. Don't let them miss out. And connect with us on all places social.